As Typhoon Podul barrels toward Taiwan's east, lawmakers scramble to get relief to disaster-struck areas. All eyes on a Central American election, as the results could see former Taiwan ally Honduras reestablish diplomatic ties. China ducks U.S. tariffs for 90 more days as Trump extends his deadline for a potential trade deal.
We'll see what happens. They've been dealing quite nicely. The relationship is very good with President Xi and myself.
Plus,
我们其实还是有个基本的门槛，在海外的这个公司呢，它的股东有一半以上是属于我们台湾人，好，或者是有华侨的身份。
Taiwanese businesses overseas are getting a fiscal lifeline as U.S. tariffs cut into cash flows. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Weather officials have issued land and sea warnings for Typhoon Podul as it approaches Taiwan from the east. Podul strengthened from a severe tropical storm into a moderate typhoon overnight. Authorities issued a sea warning in the early morning on Tuesday and land warnings across the south later on Tuesday. Premier Zhou Tai has also been reporting to lawmakers about proposed disaster relief and prevention legislation. He says the government's response to a recent chain of storms in the south was lacking.
我也承认，我们面对这样强风豪雨，我们的韧性不足。我们面对这样的电力、电讯的破坏情况底下，我们修复的速度不足。我们面对这种复合性、连续性的灾害底下，我们去媒合、整合的能力不足。
The Central Weather Administration is expecting Typhoon Podul to make landfall along the southeast coast on Wednesday morning. As the typhoon nears Taiwan, the country's legislature is reviewing proposals to improve disaster recovery and prevention. Lawmakers have gathered in Taipei to support changes to the drafts. Those include putting budgets toward removing dangerous structures and tightening collaboration between local and central governments. Irene Lin reports.
After two storms ravaged Taiwan's southwest, and with another now heading towards the east coast, two ruling Democratic Progressive Party lawmakers are here in Taipei to call for amendments to a pair of disaster relief and prevention proposals. The $1.87 billion relief draft is designed to help affected communities help rebuild homes and infrastructure after large storms and subsequent intense rainfall hit the southwest hard. The cabinet approved the draft on August 7th. But these legislators say the current drafts don't do enough to address some key issues. Lin Jianxun says the central government underestimates the scale of the damage. He points to the importance of a stable communication system during times of crisis and calls for the central government's help in removing a type of roofing and wall material that becomes toxic when ruptured.
这个台风等于来检验我们的基础建设，例如。 一开始造成很大恐慌，就是因为灾区跟外界完全断了通信。如果全线的把它的电缆光纤地下化给强化了，我们过去所谓偏远地方，就是沿海地带的一个基础设施。灾后的拆除重建有一个特别棘手的东西，就是石棉瓦。因为石棉瓦它是有毒的，石棉瓦的拆除、整理以及运送，这个要。 特别在这个有一个特别的预算，应该把它抓出来。
Meanwhile, Guo Guowen says the Disaster Prevention and Protection Act, which regulates relationships between government bodies responsible for disaster response, also needs to change. He says the Central Emergency Operations Center should have more authority in commanding disaster relief efforts in regional areas.
该县市应变中心 无能力予以应变的时候，跨县市的时候，整个中央就应该要成立所谓的跨县市的这个救灾协调中心。那怎么只有协调呢？应该把协调提升为指挥中心。那这指挥中心的时候呢，要看灾情的大小跟范围，把这个指挥官可以到这个行政院长，甚至到国安层级的总统。
The two lawmakers also point to recovery in local economies, such as agriculture, arts, and tourism. and say compensation for farmers should be prioritized to protect Taiwan's food security. The two drafts are still being processed in the legislature, but time is running short for this legislation and for people in affected areas as Typhoon Podul fast approaches. Luvi Li and Irene Lin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Several candidates in Honduras' upcoming presidential race have voiced support for restoring formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Such a move would be a major win for Taiwan, which has seen its diplomatic allies dwindle to just a dozen in recent years. Cadence Quaranta has been monitoring this development and joins us live from our newsroom in Taipei. Cadence, how has Taiwan responded to these candidates' comments?
So Taiwan's foreign ministry touched on this today at a routine press conference. Basically, they said that they're going to be paying close attention to what happens in Honduras' presidential election and in the race leading up to it. And they appeared to show a sense of cautious optimism. Here's what they said.
关于洪都拉斯的总统大选，外交部持续关注洪国的总统选情发展。对于任何有助于提升台湾国际地位以及拓展台湾外交空间的可能，外交部也都以维护国家尊严与利益，同时秉持着平等互惠的原则来慎重看待。
Taiwan's foreign minister has also previously said that he would welcome a decision to reestablish ties with Honduras. As you mentioned, Taiwan only has a handful of allies left, and those remaining China's trying to put pressure on to switch ties. Honduras switched diplomatic relations from China to Taiwan in 2023. They basically said that closer links with China would be better for their economy. They said that they were in significant debt. And they had asked for billions of dollars from Taiwan in economic aid, but that Taiwan had refused to give them what they asked for. But now, just 2 years later, two of its candidates who are considered frontrunners in the race are saying that they support switching relations back to Taiwan. One of those candidates is from the Liberal Party. He basically said that if he was elected, he intended to restore relations with Taiwan and said that China was trying to exploit Honduras. The other was a candidate from the Nationalist Party who basically said that Honduras was, quote, 100 times better off allied with Taiwan, and said that if he was elected, he would move to have Honduras moving away from China and towards Taiwan. This all means that in Taiwan, Honduras' presidential election in November, on November 30th, will be closely watched by many people. And that's because a move to resume ties would really be good for Taiwan's efforts to build recognition and legitimacy on the world stage.
Thanks, Cadence. That was Cadence Quaranta reporting live from our Taipei newsroom. President Lai Ching-te's approval rating has taken a big hit, dropping nearly 9 percentage points according to a new poll. These latest numbers follow a failed mass lawmaker recall movement, U.S. tariff negotiations, and ongoing disaster relief issues after heavy rains battered the country's center and south. But the opposition faces challenges of its own in Taiwan's post-recall reality. Once all is said and done, once all the dust has settled, it spells trouble for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party after a mass lawmaker recall vote in late July failed to unseat anyone from the main opposition Kuomintang. The latest polls from the Taiwanese Public Opinion Foundation show a steep decline in President Lai Ching-te's ratings. His approval has fallen roughly 9 percentage points since June, and for the first time ever, more than half of respondents disapprove of his performance. Things aren't much better for Premier Zhou Rong-tai, who's also polling at record low numbers. The ruling party has suddenly found itself on the back foot.
上天给我们这个考题，我们愿意承担未来的责任，我们也愿意为这一次所有的不足向国人表示最大的歉意。
Several issues beyond the failed recall have plagued the DPP. The U.S. slapped a 20% tariff on most Taiwanese goods on top of existing levies. That's higher than the 15% tariffs imposed on neighboring Japan and South Korea.
And then the news that Japan was able to actually negotiate away these added tariffs on top of the existing tariffs was actually just combining all these factors, increasing the Taiwanese people's skepticism and doubts about the government's ability to handle Taiwan's relationship with the Trump administration.
Recent extreme weather events have also caused headaches for the ruling party as recovery efforts draw scrutiny.
对刚刚院长公开表达，此次风灾行政院整体的救灾能力不足，应变能力不足，韧性能力不足。我想本席深表同意。
But just because the ruling party is struggling, that does not mean the opposition faces no challenges of its own. It wasn't long ago when sights like this were common. The smaller Taiwan People's Party standing with the KMT in opposition to the recall movement. But TPP chair Huang Guocang recently expressed that he intends to run for new Taipei city mayor in next year's elections. The city is a KMT stronghold, having elected the party to the mayor's seat for nearly 2 decades.
For him to actually put it out there, he is hoping that the KMT would come to him and meet him halfway and try to negotiate about how both parties are going to put together a list that they both agree and, to avoid the splitting of the vote.
Will Huang's decision create a rift between the KMT and TPP? Or can the opposition find a way to keep things friendly? All 3 of Taiwan's major political parties now face major questions. For the DPP, it's about how to reconnect and win back the people's trust. For the KMT and TPP, it's about how to maintain an opposition alliance while trying to preserve and grow the respective parties. Lian Lian and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus. Taiwan's military is looking to get a special budget to acquire more weapons from the U.S. amid growing pressure from China. Alan Liu has more.
Taiwan will soon propose a new special military procurement budget for next year of over $20 billion. Defense officials say the proposal shows the country's dedication to strengthening its resilience and preparing for asymmetric warfare.
我们遵从我们政府赖总统的指导，我们会达到3%。那至于说特别预算的内容，我们会依照敌情的威胁和需求，来逐列编列。
The reported budget covers both previously sought items and new purchases. For the Army, it includes 168 self-propelled rocket artillery vehicles, 28 high-precision rocket systems, and over 2,000 attack drones. For the Navy, the budget proposes over 1,300 uncrewed attack surface vessels, more than 200 smart vertical takeoff and landing drones, and over 700 anti-tank missiles. Plans for coastal attack and reconnaissance drones are still under discussion. The Air Force plans to purchase 4 more Patriot air defense missile systems, as well as 9 NASAMS and 2 Skybound air defense missile systems.
就从海马斯到这个 M109A7等于是这些火炮跟这个这些炮兵火箭的这个部分大概都完全精准化。那这样子整个陆上的作战能力就如同这个顾部长这个在汉光演习检讨里面讲的，就是能够以这个火力来取代兵力哈。那这样呢，当然我们这个作战的能力就会强化很多。
The reported procurement list hasn't been finalized. The Defense Ministry says this budget could be submitted for legislative review as early as September. Taiwan's arms purchases are largely aimed at countering China's growing military threats. On Tuesday, the country reported 14 Chinese military aircraft operating nearby, and this comes after an unusually large incursion of more than 80 aircraft in a single day over the weekend.
我们必须要的思考，就是如何应付中共这个未来的这个作战的能力，这个是可能也是我们目前比较急迫的课题。
As Taiwan works to improve its self-defense capabilities, these special budgets may be a big boost for these efforts if it gets legislative approval. Joseph Wu and Ellen Liu for TaiwanPlus.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a 90-day pause for tariffs on China, which could have reached more than 100%. The delay comes alongside a deal with Nvidia over chip sales to China and reported demands from Beijing for the U.S. to ease export controls. Chris Gordon has more.
With just hours to go before U.S. tariffs on China were set to take effect, U.S. President Donald Trump addressed the possibility of further talks.
We've been dealing very nicely with China, as you probably have heard. They have tremendous tariffs that they're paying to the United States of America. And we'll see what happens. They've been dealing quite nicely. The relationship is very good with President Xi and myself.
Later that night, the White House issued an executive order and a joint statement with Beijing, both sides agreeing to delay reciprocal tariffs for an additional 90 days as they work toward a trade deal. The deal pulls back what would have been up to 145% tariffs on China. Trump also confirmed Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang agreed to pay 15% of Nvidia's China chip revenues to the U.S. government for licenses to sell its H20 AI chip in China, hinting that Nvidia's next-generation Blackwell chips could also be sold there with conditions.
I released them only from the H20. Now, on the Blackwell, I think he's coming to see me again about that, but that will be a unenhanced version of the big one.
Huang has long argued that U.S. chipmakers should stay active in China and denies Chinese concerns that Nvidia chips allow for backdoor controls.
As a technology provider, we need customers. All providers need customers. You can't be complacent about that. And the unintended consequences, the long-term consequences of not participating in the China market, is unknown. But I doubt that it's positive.
Beijing is reportedly pushing for looser U.S. export controls as part of trade talks, especially on high bandwidth memory, or HBM, a key bottleneck for Chinese AI systems. With another 90 days on the clock, both sides will see what kind of chips, bargaining or otherwise, they're willing to trade to get what they want. Joseph Wu and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
The Chinese government is reportedly urging local companies to avoid Nvidia's H20 AI chip, despite the U.S. tech giant's efforts to court the Chinese market. That's according to a Bloomberg report. Beijing's guidance especially cautions against using the chips for government-related purposes. It follows Chinese state media warnings of a possible backdoor for remote control, a claim Nvidia rejects. In a statement, an Nvidia spokesperson said, quote, "The H20 is not a military product or for government infrastructure." The move comes after U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed a deal in which Nvidia would pay 15% of its China chip revenues to the U.S. government in exchange for licenses to sell the H20 there. With the latest round of U.S. tariffs taking effect, Taiwanese exports to the U.S., particularly those from traditional industries, could face serious costs due to tariff stacking. While final tariffs on Taiwan's semiconductor products are still pending, exporters in other industries like textiles, who originally faced tariffs of around 10 to 20%, are now seeing rates rise to between 30 to 40%. The same applies to other sectors like bicycles, plastics, rubber, and machinery. And agricultural and fishery products are now subject to 20% tariffs compared to none previously. In addition, importers of agricultural, fishery, and textile products are also likely to be among the most affected by the market opening to the U.S. Members from Taiwan's Federation of Industries and other experts are urging the government to take action and provide funding support. A new tariff relief package is on the way, aiming at helping Taiwanese-owned businesses abroad recoup losses from new U.S. duties. John Van Trieste has the details.
The government has a plan in place to help domestic businesses weather U.S. tariffs, but there are still lots of Taiwan-owned businesses abroad that need help too. Now, there's a plan in the works to help them stay afloat. The Overseas Community Affairs Council, or OCAC, has met with Taiwanese business people based around the world. And it's found most have one thing in common, a need for financing as tariffs force them to shift the layout of their investments. So the council's teamed up with Taiwan's Overseas Credit Guarantee Fund to make getting that cash easier.
我们从过去的200万要提高到同一关系人300万。 那么同时呢，我们有一个30万美元的专案，是针对在最近的这个 不管是1个月或者2个月的平均，或者1季的平均，或者半年的平均，乃至于到1年平均都可以。只要能够提出这些相关的财报资料来证明是因为对等关税影响而造成营业额衰退10%以上。
There are further perks too, including some help with covering interest and processing fees. Many of the businesses facing the squeeze are small to medium-sized, and those that get approved for both kinds of relief can have a few $1 million to cushion the impact of tariffs. Best of all, from the perspective of banks, is that the council guarantees 90% of the loans, lowering risk. But there are limits to this relief program. The $300,000 loan, for instance, will only be offered for 1 year. And there are also rules about which overseas companies can get tariff relief.
也不是说全世界的任何的条例上，我们其实还是有个基本的门槛，就是它这个在海外的这个公司呢，它的股东有1半以上是属于我们台湾人，好，或者是有华侨的身份，好，主要是还是要有这个基本门槛，要不然全世界的公司都来申请，我们也是承担不起啦，哈。
The Taiwanese business people based in Southeast Asia and Latin America sitting on either side of these officials express hope about the plan as a means to deal with deep uncertainty in the U.S., one of their big export markets. The relief program is set to start in September. And while U.S. tariffs will bite, especially in some countries, the hope is to give Taiwanese businesses abroad a chance to adapt and make it through. Eason Chen and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
The rise of artificial intelligence is bringing the world an ever-expanding range of services and solutions. With its strong tech background, Taiwan is host to several companies, both big and small, developing AI products mainly for the local market. But it's left some asking what Taiwan can do to globalize its AI industry. To learn more about how some businesses here are trying to scale up, Connected host Divya Gopalan sat down with Sega Chang, the CEO of AI transformation services firm AI Kala.
Now, you've said Taiwan doesn't really have an AI industry. You said that about a year ago.
Yeah.
Where do you stand now when it comes to that?
Okay. Well, the reason I said this is because Taiwan has always, have this dominant hardware sector, hardware companies, some of the best ones in the world, in the AI landscape. So for decades, so Taiwan has been, characterized, by project-based solutions or by contract work, in terms of software projects. So there was this prevalent, mindset that software is just an accessory, to the hardware industry. And it is treated as a cost center, rather than a value driver. And so, the mindset is still there. And so that's why I said, there's not really an AI industry that comprises of strong product-oriented companies, strong VC ecosystems, or sustained investment in AI foundational research in Taiwan. I think these are the weak spots, I'm seeing now in Taiwan. So that's why I said, we are still fighting, to build a very strong ecosystem around AI software.
Okay, so on that note, I want to take a look at some rankings here. If you've been following the news, you may have the impression that the U.S. is ahead of the pack on AI. That can be seen in the Global AI Index from the UK-based news website Tortoise Media. The index looks at metrics in 3 categories: AI implementation, innovation, and investment. Taiwan ranks a respectable 21st, but lags behind the more advanced economies in Asia, which includes China, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and Hong Kong. So what we can see, and perhaps maybe what your experience might tell you, the U.S. seems to be one of the biggest innovators in AI, which often skews the results, in particular this graph there, the results in their favor. But how do others, including Taiwan, compare, and if we're looking at in terms of R&D and academic research on AI?
Well, the U.S. is, of course, the undisputed leader, in terms of AI. So you can see that it outperforms basically every country in the world. And it's an obvious, a leader, in the AI industry. So, I think this is a result, of a virtuous cycle that the U.S. has been built up. So, well, that includes sustained investment in AI foundational research at top university. That's one of the key factors that drive these results. And the second one is, of course, a very strong VC ecosystem that is not afraid, of making high risk, high reward bets. Well, and the last one is, of course, the U.S. capability, to attract the best talents, from around the world. So these are the three pillars that really drive this result, that making U.S. the obvious leader, in AI in the world. And so, well, in terms of the academic research or in terms of the foundational research in AI, I think other countries should really play a different game. I mean, it's out of question that we try to outspend the U.S., in terms of R&D research. That's not feasible, and that would be too naive to do. But, well, take Taiwan, for example. We have a very strong, hardware industry. Even though our academic research is more aligned, with manufacturing and semicon industries, but there are also some top-notch, researchers here that we can do. And so, well, just focus on the strength of every country. I think every country is doing the same. Just focus on their strength in terms of, AI progression.
That was Connected host Divya Gopalan speaking with iCalla CEO Sega Chang. To watch the full episode of Connected, head over to TaiwanPlus.com or our YouTube channel. And thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. Finally, we visit an underground archaeological site in Italy that has recently attracted tourists seeking cooler temperatures. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.